Hey guys, tonight we travel back to the bitter, bone-stiffening cold of 18th century Canada, where frost clings to your eyebrows before you've even managed a full yawn, and ice crunches under your fur-lined boots with a sound so dry and final. It could be punctuation. You're standing at the edge of a frozen river, squinting against a sky so pale it might shatter. Your breath hangs thick and visible in the still morning air, and your fingers, despite your best efforts, are already beginning to rebel inside their mittens. This is fur trader country, and you probably wouldn't last an hour here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Let me know in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The day begins early because there's not much choice in the matter. The cold is a kind of alarm clock, though not one you'd ever choose voluntarily. You stir from your bedroll, wrapped in layers of rough wool and animal hides that smell like someone else's idea of comfort. The hut is dark except for a faint blue. Light leaking in through the cracks in the wooden shutters, and the fire's long gone out. Of course it has. You're not surprised. Fires in this climate have the lifespan of an exhausted squirrel. You stretch slowly because moving too quickly leads to pain in surprising places: neck, knees, a weird spot in your shoulder that you forgot existed. Every part of you feels like it belongs to someone older and less flexible. Welcome to fur trading. Outside, the snow creaks underfoot, that strange high-pitched crunch of deep winter. Your coat is made of caribou skin, your boots lined with rabbit fur, and still you feel the cold like an uninvited opinion. Some traders joke that Canada didn't have a winter, just one very long, passive-aggressive apology from the weather gods. You trudge across the clearing toward the supply shed. Your nose is running but too frozen to drip. And as you walk, you see the others emerging from their own shelters, figures wrapped in hide and flannel, lumbering and blinking like sleep-deprived bears. Nobody talks, not yet. Conversation begins only after the first mug of something hot, preferably laced with whatever spirits survived the night, without being accidentally drunk by someone pretending it was for warmth. A pot is slung over a new fire, steam curling up in lazy ribbons. Inside, yesterday's tea leaves, a chunk of something greasy, and a few dandelion roots for flair. You drink it anyway. It tastes like warm moss and a little bit of hope. Your breath plumes as you squat near the flames. Holding your gloved hands close but not too close, you've learned your lesson there. More than once, someone has melted a mitten or two in the effort to warm their fingertips. And the smell of burning wool? Let's just say it's not the kind of scent you bottle for fancy lodges. Today's chores are simple enough: checking trap lines, inspecting stored pelts, arguing over inventory figures nobody fully trusts. But before all that, there's the issue of breakfast. You open a pouch and pull out a block of pemmican, one of those historical foods that manages to be both legendary and deeply questionable. It's a mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and berries. Think beef jerky meets candle wax, with a surprise hint of sour fruit. It doesn't spoil easily, which is both its selling point and its biggest insult. You gnaw on it like a beaver, with regret. Historians still debate whether the traditional recipes were genuinely palatable or simply tolerated in the absence of better options. Some argue that the addition of berries gave it a pleasing tang. Others call that wishful chewing. Either way, you eat it because there's nothing else. The sun, if you can call it that, finally peeks over the horizon. It's more of a suggestion than a presence, dull and colorless, like someone forgot to plug it in. But still, the light means movement, and movement means survival. You shoulder your pack, still chewing, and join the slow parade of fur traders as they trudge across the snow like mismatched chess pieces on an uneven board. Today will be long. There will be wind. There will be boredom. But beneath it all, there's something quietly astonishing. You are part of a centuries-old rhythm, a rough and icy heartbeat that once beat across a continent. And you haven't even met the saunas yet. The trail out to the trapping grounds is already half buried in snow, but your feet remember the way. It winds like an afterthought between stands of bare birch trees whose white bark flakes like old paint. The forest around you hums with a kind of muffled emptiness, the sound of everything alive holding its breath. Even the birds seem to have taken the day off. You pull your scarf higher until it covers most of your face, leaving just enough room for your eyes to water in the wind. The cold finds the gaps, as it always does. It's not cruel exactly, just thorough. Like a bureaucrat of nature, making sure every exposed patch of skin has its paperwork filed in frost. Behind you, your companions are scattered along the trail in various states of wakefulness and complaint. One mutters something about frostbite, and another snorts in response, the sound sharp in the stillness. You don't speak. There's a rhythm to these mornings, and silence is the prelude. After about an hour of trudging, the line of trees opens into a small clearing where the first of the trap lines is set. You pause here. Not out of reverence, but because your legs are negotiating a ceasefire with your knees. The snow in this spot is deeper, and even the act of standing still feels like a protest against your own better judgment. The traps themselves are simple snares and deadfalls, nothing fancy, just effective, and checking them becomes almost meditative. You kneel, brush away the snow, inspect, reset. It's the same motion over and over, a kind of frozen yoga for the chronically underfed. Historians still argue whether fur traders developed these traps independently or adopted them wholesale from the indigenous peoples they encountered. Most lean toward the latter, acknowledging the deep technical knowledge of native trappers. But fur traders being fur traders, they often wrote journal entries implying they invented everything from the snare to the snowshoe. At one trap, a rabbit awaits. It's already gone stiff, eyes wide in that strange, startled way of animals caught mid-thought. You handle it gently, grudging respect for something that probably had no idea it was part of international commerce. You add it to the sack and move on. Mid-morning brings the first real signs of life. A pair of squirrels rocket between trees in a dispute that seems equal parts territorial and theatrical. One of your companions points and laughs, and for a moment, the group feels warmer, if not in temperature, than in spirit. You stop for a farah break near a half-frozen stream. The ice along the edges is thin and laced with bubbles, and someone tries to chip out a chunk to melt for tea. It doesn't go well. The pot falls in. There's a splash. Everyone groans. The moment is immortalized. As another entry in the long saga of "this seemed like a good idea at the time." Snacking resumes. More pemmican. A few strips of smoked trout that taste, surprisingly, of actual fish and not just salt and despair. Someone even shares a piece of dried apple, a rare treat that is passed around like a sacred relic. As you chew, you glance at the sky, noting how pale it's grown. Not quite gray, not quite white. Just that in-between color that signals, get your chores done before it changes its mind. And then, like an unexpected birthday present from the universe, someone mentions the sauna. You perk up. Yes, that sauna. The mobile one. The one made from leftover canvas, pine saplings, and stubbornness. It's not scheduled until evening, but the mere mention of it is enough to thaw your resolve. "Tonight," says a trader in a patched blue coat, "we fire it up. Proper steam this time, not like last week." You nod slowly, as if you're skeptical, but your toes are already dreaming in sauna. You remember last week's steam attempt, where a misjudged fire led to more smoke than heat, and someone nearly boiled their own sock by accident. Still, the promise is tantalizing. Historians still debate when the tradition of portable winter saunas began among Canadian fur traders. Some believe it was inspired directly by Finnish and Scandinavian voyageurs who migrated with their heat-loving customs. Others argue it was born from sheer desperation and a clever misuse of canvas and firewood. Either way, the result is the same: a hissing, steamy haven in the middle of a snow-choked wilderness. The rest of the day becomes easier to bear knowing the sauna waits at the end. Each footstep is like saving up for something beautiful. You move with purpose now, finishing the trap lines, collecting pelts, and even enduring another mug of questionable tea without complaint, because tonight you will sweat. And not just from fear of frostbite. You return to camp just as the sky begins its slow descent into lavender. It's not quite sunset, not quite daylight, just that weirdly suspended hour when shadows lengthen like lazy cats and everything looks like it's been dipped in cold tea. The tents, the trees, even the smoke rising from the central fire all wear that same dim filter, as if someone turned down the contrast on the world.camp, for what it's worth, is humble but proud. A few canvas shelters lean against one another like conspirators. The cook fire sputters in the middle, ringed with stones that have names you've never bothered to learn. There's a sled half buried in snow, a pair of boots frozen mid-dry, and the unmistakable aroma of something being reheated to death. But what matters most right now isn't dinner. It's the sauna. You spot it immediately. Or rather, you spot the ragged outline of the canvas structure perched over a frame of bent pine branches, already giving off small puffs of steam from its seams. It looks ridiculous, like a giant satchel, stuffed too full. But to your aching joints and wind-battered spirit, it might as well be Versailles. Inside, a few of the others are already fussing. You hear muffled grunts, the scraping of rocks, and the occasional joyful yelp of someone realizing that yes, the stones are finally hot enough. Here's how it works. First, you gather rocks big, volcanic ones if you can get them, though out. Here you settle for whatever isn't completely encased in snow. You pile them onto a metal grate, or if you're short on luxury, straight onto a dugout pit. Then comes the fire. It has to burn for hours, crackling, hissing, turning the stones into miniature suns. Once that's done, someone, usually the someone, boldest or the hungriest for heat, crawls inside and pours water, sometimes mixed with spruce needles or herbs, onto the stones. The result? Instant steam. Blistering, blessed steam. Historians still argue whether this method was copied directly from indigenous sweat lodge traditions or simply arose from necessity and shared cold weather misery. The sweat lodge, sacred in many First Nations cultures, served spiritual and communal roles. Unlike the fur trader's haphazard sauna, a tool of survival with a touch of vanity. Tonight, as the first wave of steam explodes with a loud hiss, you wait your turn outside, hopping from foot to foot. The air is cold, your skin dry and tight, and your breath forms little clouds that vanish before you can count to 3. You feel half human, half chimney. The canvas flaps open. A wall of hot, pine-scented air slaps you in the face. Out crawls a trader with cheeks redder than fresh berries and a goofy, blissed-out grin. "You're up," he wheezes. "Don't bring the snow in with you." You nod solemnly, like someone being handed a holy relic, and crouch to crawl inside. Instant transformation. The warmth is oppressive in the best way, like being hugged by soup. Your nose runs, your eyes sting, and your frozen fingers begin to twitch back to life. The others inside nod at you, already drenched and glowing like peeled tomatoes. They shift to make room. Someone ladles water onto the stones. The hiss sounds like applause. You sit cross-legged on a folded tarp, your wool shirt clinging to your back, and feel the tension begin to dissolve. Not dramatically, just a gradual surrender. Your spine stops protesting. Your shoulders drop. Your brain, which has been playing a highlight reel of miserable snow moments all day, suddenly decides to go quiet. There's laughter, but it's low and breathy. Someone makes a joke about sweating out all the bad decisions from trading season. Another claims the steam is curing his homesickness. You believe him a little. You close your eyes and inhale. The air is sharp with cedar, and underneath it, the lingering scent of whatever mystery stew is bubbling back at the fire. Somehow it all fits. The sweat pours. You don't bother wiping it. You let it run, let it cleanse, let it tell your body that it's still capable of feeling good. A few of the others start talking about their home villages. One mentions a river back in Normandy. Another describes a forest in Lithuania where the snow fell so silently you could hear it settle. There's a pause. Then someone very softly says, "I miss the smell of bread." You don't speak. You're too deep in the heat, too far gone in the steam. Historians still debate whether these makeshift saunas fostered real camaraderie or simply forced it. There's something about sitting half-naked in a steaming cloth tent that tends to drop social. Pretenses. Titles vanish. Grudges steam out through your pores. For a brief while, everyone's just a sweaty sack of hopes and regrets. Time stretches. Minutes become uncertain. Your skin prickles and pulses. Finally, you know it's time. Your pulse is loud. Your thoughts are quiet. You nod to the others and crawl out. The cold outside hits you like a bucket of ice marbles. Your body screams and thanks you at the same time. You stand, barefoot in the snow, chest steaming like a roast duck. You feel both ridiculous and transcendent. Someone tosses you a towel. It's damp and smells like a dozen other people, but it's a gesture that feels like royalty. You dry off as best you can. Then pull on your clothes, each layer a return to reality. The wool sticks. The boots are reluctant. But you're smiling. And for the first time all week, your body doesn't hurt. You don't remember sitting back down by the fire, but here you are cross-legged, warm from the sauna and half-dazed, staring at a pot that looks like it's been bubbling since the last calendar year. Someone stirs it occasionally, not so. Much out of necessity, but more as a way to pretend they're contributing. The pot contains a mystery stew, a phrase that, in fur trader circles, is less alarming than it sounds. It might be rabbit, might be squirrel, might be leftover boot. Scrapings. You decide not to ask. The stew smells better than it looks, which isn't saying much because it looks like a melted boot. But after what your body's just been through, anything vaguely warm and edible feels like cuisine from the French court. You accept your ladleful with gratitude, cradling the tin bowl like it's precious metal. You blow on it gently, watching the steam curl upward like a ghost trying to escape. Someone hands you a chunk of hard bread. It's more ice than crust, but you soften it in the stew, pretending you're an 18th century gourmet. A bite in, and it's not half bad. Earthy, chewy, vaguely gamey. You chew slowly, savoring it not for taste, but for its warmth. Conversation around the fire is muted. Nothing like the rowdy exchanges of earlier. Now it's stories told in embers. And grunts. Someone murmurs a joke about moose mating habits. Someone else hums a song their grandmother taught them off-key, but oddly lovely. The older men sit with their backs straight, staring into the flames like prophets waiting for visions. The younger ones steal glances at the stars. Across from you, a man named Louis begins carving something from a chunk of antler. You've seen him do this before, always after the sauna. His hands move in practice strokes, shaving tiny curls of bone into a vaguely familiar shape. Tonight it might be a spoon, or a squirrel, or an angry squirrel wielding a spoon, you glance upward. Sky is ridiculously clear. Stars litter the heavens like someone spilled a salt shaker across black velvet. The Milky Way drapes itself lazily over the treetops, and your breath clouds in time with the fire's crackle. It's almost theatrical, like the world is trying to convince you it's still magical. You hear a pop from the fire. Someone curses gently. A log shifts, and a shower of sparks dances upward, trying briefly to join the constellations. For a moment, you believe they might. Then the conversation drifts toward trade. Beavers going for 3 times the price, says one. Only in Montreal, says another. Only if you bring it clean, someone adds. You don't say much. You're not here for economics tonight. You're here for the slow thaw, the slow fade, the quiet magic that happens only in these rare hours between frost and sleep. Historians still argue whether fur trader campsites were sites of true cultural blending or just opportunistic truce zones. After all, these evenings were often shared, with indigenous allies. Cree, Metis, Ojibwe brought not only furs but stories, songs, and survival skills that traders couldn't have lasted a week without. Tonight, though, it's just your crew. But the echoes remain in the stew's seasoning, in the way someone ties their moccasins, in the lullaby someone hums without knowing where it came from. You sip your stew slowly now. The last few bites cling to the bottom, but you tilt the bowl, using the last bit of bread to wipe it clean. Someone offers you a pipe. You take it, not because you like tobacco, but because passing it along feels sacred. Somehow smoke drifts upward, curling in ghostly spirals. It smells like cedar and clove, like something ancient and aching. Across the fire, someone leans back on their elbows and sighs. Ever wonder if this is the best we'll have it? He asks. Someone chuckles. Only every night. Another voice pipes up, thick with sleep. I'll take cold fingers and hot stew over politics in Quebec City any day. There are grunts of agreement, muffled laughter, and someone tossing another log on the fire with the ceremony of a priest at the altar. Rustle to your right draws your attention. One of the traders has fallen asleep upright, his chin resting on the handle of his axe like it's a pillow made of oak. His mouth is slightly open. He snores like a contented horse. No one moves to wake him. You sit there longer than you need to. Not because you're especially warm anymore, or especially comfortable, but because this moment feels important in a way you can't articulate. Like your body understands it's part of something older than language, older than maps. You realize your boots are still off. You wriggle your toes near the fire and feel more alive than you have all week. The others begin to drift. Not all at once. Just gradually, like snowflakes melting into dark cloth. Some to tents, some to lean-tos. One to a sled that's improbably cozy thanks to an illegal bear pelt. You stay until only embers remain, little red eyes blinking slowly. Beneath the ash you stand, stretch, pop your back like an old floorboard, and without thinking, you whisper, thanks, to no one in particular. You trudge away from the fire, toes slightly less numb, stomach full of stew, lungs seasoned with smoke. The snow crunches quietly underfoot, not the loud day snow crunch, but that softened, sleepy nighttime version where each step is a suggestion more than a command. It's full dark now, no lingering sunset, no blush of color. Just the silver of stars and the pale blue cast of moonlight over everything. Your shelter is a crude affair. Half lean-to, half igloo, all survival. It's made from a combination of pine boughs, snow bricks, and sheer bullheadedness. The entrance flap is fur, possibly Volf, possibly mystery. You lift it, duck, and step inside. It's dim, but not dark. A single oil lamp glows in one corner, casting dancing shadows on the walls like cave paintings that haven't decided what they want to be yet. The air smells like smoked fish, damp wool, and pine needles somehow not unpleasant. You kick off your boots, grateful again for the foot-soaked heat of the sauna still lingering in your bones. Inside your bedroll is a fur-lined cocoon. You crawl in feet first, still fully clothed, because this is the 18th century Canadian wilderness and changing. Into pajamas is not a thing. Your coat becomes your blanket. Your wool scarf becomes your hat. And your hat, naturally, becomes part of your pillow strategy. You sigh. Not dramatically, just a small exhale, the sound of surrender. Your back finds the one flat spot in the bata-naba sleeping area, which is an act of divine grace in itself. Outside, you can hear someone trying to tie down a sled tarp, the knots resisting with flaps and flails. Somewhere farther out, an owl hoots. The trees answer in creaks and groans. Wood expanding and contracting in the night cold. The oil lamp flickers. You stare up at the ceiling, if you can call it that. It's more a dome of snow and sticks, but it feels protective. You spot a leaf, caught in the construction, perfectly preserved and slightly absurd. How did a birch leaf get in here? Was it intentional? Is this a subtle wilderness feng shui? You chuckle softly. This is the part of camp life people don't write about, the quiet moment after the warmth, after the food, when there's nothing left to do but be. Historians still argue whether these fur trader encampments encouraged introspection or simply didn't allow for anything else. After all, what do you do when there are no newspapers, no smartphones, no late-night snacks besides? Dried cod? You think, you remember. You invent entire conversations with loved ones you haven't seen in years. Sometimes you recite imaginary letters in your head, hoping someday you'll write them down. You won't. Tonight, your mind drifts not to home, but to earlier before the sauna, before the stew. You remember the morning frost on your mustache, the way the sled dogs looked at you like you were insane for trying to start the day before sunrise. You remember how your fingers stuck to a metal buckle, how you swore in 3 languages, how your friend Pierre laughed so hard he nearly fell off his log seat. You think about that portable sauna again, how absurd it is. A wood box on a frozen lake filled with steam and shouting men just to feel briefly human again. But isn't that what all of this is? A collection of absurdities layered together like wool blankets, hard labor, freezing nights, mystery stew, and the deeply irrational decision to spend winter chasing beaver pelts across a frozen continent. You hear a snore, possibly your own. You shift again, trying to find that sweet spot where your hip bone doesn't press directly into ice. You succeed, briefly, then lose it again. Sleep doesn't come fast out here, but it does come honest. Someone coughs outside. The flap lifts briefly, just enough to let in a whisper of icy air, and then settles again. You wonder if the others are still awake. If someone else is lying under their furs thinking the same thoughts. Probably. Humans have always been synchronized like that, especially in silence. You remember a story Louis told once about a trapper who lost his sled, fell through a river, and still managed to make it back to camp with a grin and one dry sock. It's the sock that made him a legend, Louis insisted. Anyone can survive, but surviving with style? That's rare. You smile at the memory. The lamp flickers. Again, then dims. You let it. Darkness here isn't scary. It's full, thick, comforting, like the woods are pulling a blanket over the whole camp, saying, "Shh, enough now." Your eyes close, but your ears keep working. The distant howl of something with too many teeth. The shuffle of a trader adjusting. They're betting. A fart, bold and unapologetic. More laughter. The sound of someone whispering a prayer or a recipe, or just the word warm over and over again like a spell. You sink deeper into your cocoon. Tomorrow will be cold and long and filled with more work than you'd like, But tonight is just warm enough, just quiet enough, just absurd enough to be perfect. You wake before the sun, or rather, you wake because your nose is cold. The rest of your face is tucked comfortably inside your scarf, but your nose has declared mutiny. It sticks out like a weather vane, letting you know just how deeply the temperature has dropped overnight. You shift, your joints cracking in ways that sound vaguely like Morse code. Somewhere, a dog barks once either a warning or a yawn. It's too early to tell. You don't rise yet. You just listen. The camp is a symphony of morning reluctance. Someone coughs. Someone swears. Something clatters, probably a frozen ladle hitting a frozen pot. The trees are still, but you can hear ice shifting on the nearby river, cracking and groaning like an old man rolling over in his sleep. Your body debates with you stay in the fur cocoon or face the Arctic ballet of getting dressed in freezing clothes. You know what you have to do. You just wish it didn't involve standing up. Eventually you do. First, the boots stiff and half frozen. Then the coat, which feels like trying to wrestle a bear that's decided to become a blanket. Finally, the mittens, which somehow shrank overnight and now require a contortionist's finesse to pull on. Outside, the sky is still black. Not star black anymore, more like ink diluted with milk. The pre-dawn kind of light where nothing has color yet. The fire pit is glowing faintly. Someone's ahead of you, crouched low, coaxing the embers like a gambler whispering to dice. You nod, he grunts. This is the standard Canadian fur trader greeting before 6 a.m. You grab your tin mug, which has spent the night pretending to be a glacier, and fill it with the first pour of morning broth. It's not coffee is for civilized places. This is bone broth with maybe a pine needle or two. You sip and try not to make a face. You fail. No one cares. You glance over toward the sauna box. It's still standing, still steaming, barely. The top layer of snow has melted into little crusted ice patches, and a squirrel is investigating it like an alien spacecraft. No one's using it. Yet it's a post-work reward, not a pre-work indulgence. But you smile at the thought of it anyway. Today will be spent checking traps. Miles of snow-covered terrain. Each trap spaced just far enough to make your thighs ache, your feet blister, and your soul briefly consider a different career path. You hoist your pack onto your shoulders, adjusting the straps with a practiced yank. A few others are gathering now, blinking like lizards in the half-light. There's an unspoken competition to see who looks the least miserable. It's a game you never win. You pass by Pierre, who's got 2 dried fish sticking out of his pocket like some kind of horrible floral arrangement. For the dogs, he explains. You pretend to believe him. Historians still argue whether these early morning routines were necessary for survival or simply a form of self-imposed misery disguised as structure. Some accounts suggest that the most successful traders were those who woke late, negotiated better, and let others do the trudging. But out here, respect is earned through frozen eyelashes and frostbitten toes. The sun finally starts to rise, not quickly, not dramatically. It's a reluctant glow creeping over the treetops, tinting everything in faint golds and pale blues. You squint toward it, not because it's bright, but because it exists. A small mercy in a world that forgot warmth. As you move out toward the trail, you settle into rhythm, crunch, sigh, step, repeat. The sled follows behind, pulled by a team of dogs with more personality than patience. You've given them names, some ridiculous, some historical. The lead dog is Napoleon, which seems fitting since he's both short and prone to charging ahead without warning. The forest is quiet, but not silent. Birds call out with the kind of optimism that only comes from having feathers and no job. Squirrels chatter in judgment. Snow falls in powdery wisps from high branches. glinting like tiny stars when the sunlight finally decides to care. You reach the first trap. Empty. That's normal. You reset it, dust snow off your gloves, and keep walking. The work is simple, repetitive, and necessary. Each trap is a question. Will today be lucky? Will there be food, profit, or just another stiff walk? About halfway through the morning route, you stop to eat something. It's unidentifiable. Possibly pemmican. Possibly a rock with good marketing. You chew anyway. The dogs watch with both disgust and jealousy. You sit briefly on a fallen log, letting the sun soak into your shoulders. It's weak, but it counts. And in that moment, you remember something. The sauna. The promise of steam. The sacred ritual of thawing after a day like this. You laugh softly to yourself, startling a nearby jay into flight. This absurd combination of hunger, frost, fur, and smoke is what you signed up for. Not the glamour, not the riches. Just the quiet satisfaction of surviving one more cold morning with your humor intact and your socks only mildly damp. By midday, the cold has softened just enough for your breath to stop forming solid walls in the air. The snow crunches less like glass and more like slightly damp toast. That's what passes for warmth out here. You've now reached the farthest. Point on your trap line. Beyond this, trees. Endless trees. Possibly other traders, possibly wolves. Honestly, you don't care to find out today. You mark the spot with a notch on the birch bark and begin the slow curve back toward camp. Each trap tells its own story. One contains a hare, already stiff. You mutter a quick thanks and tuck it away in your pack. Another holds a pine marten, tiny but valuable. Still another trap has been disturbed, snow fluffed, the mechanism sprung, no animal in sight. You suspect a raccoon. Or worse, a clever fox with a grudge. You make a mental note. Bring something shinier next time. You stop for a break beside. A cluster of frozen reeds. The dogs flop into the snow, panting clouds into the cold like miniature steam engines. Napoleon rolls onto his back and makes a noise. That might be a sigh or a political protest. Out comes the second half of your rations. A dense cake of fat, berries, and ground meat. You nibble it with the enthusiasm of someone being force-fed tree bark. The dogs, naturally, stare at you as though you're enjoying a 4-course meal in Versailles. A wind kicks up, ruffling the hood of your coat and sending a flurry of powder down your neck. You shiver, grimace, and curse the idea of open collars. Historians still argue whether fur traders adopted indigenous cold weather techniques out of admiration or sheer desperation. One thing is certain, without them, none of this would be possible. Many voyageurs learned the hard way that wool soaks, canvas freezes, and the only thing more dependable than frostbite is the local knowledge passed down through generations. You recall how one elder taught your group to read the trees like maps, how the moss and windward bends could guide you when the compass needle went lazy. You also remember the advice about never trusting frozen rivers too early in the season. A lesson delivered, you think, by someone with a limp and a sour expression. You test every icy stretch with your pole, even now, even in deep winter. You may be cold, but you're not a fool. On the way back, you pass by what's left of someone else's old camp. Just the ghost of it, really. A collapsed lean-to, a circle of blackened stones, the faint smell of ash still lingering. You pause out of habit and study the sight. It tells you the same thing every old camp does. Somebody needed warmth, and then they left. You continue on, feet aching, pack heavier, and dreams of the sauna returning like a warm hallucination. Not yet, though. First, you'll need to prep the hull, feed the dogs, and pretend to be interested in whatever story Pierre is telling about the time he was chased by a moose. It's always a moose with him. When you arrive back at camp, the fire is blazing, the dogs are barking, and the smell of stew is floating in the air like a love letter from someone who knows your weaknesses. You drop your pack near the skinning post and flex your fingers until they remember what blood flow is. You nod to Baptist, who is busy boiling water in a pot that looks older than Canada itself. Good haul? He asks, not looking up. Moderate. You reply. It's code for not bad, not great, still better than last week. He grunts, then gestures toward the meat-drying rack. You hang, I sort. You shrug. Deal. Soon, you're elbow deep in routine. Checking for frostbite, trimming hides, slicing meat, cataloging it all with the kind of tired precision that only comes after hours of movement in sub-zero air. You lose time at some point. Your hands are moving, but your brain has already slinked away into that steam-scented daydream. You picture the sauna again, its makeshift frame. The patchwork of canvas and furs, the hot rocks that hiss when water meets them. It's not a fancy affair. No polished cedar, no scented oils. Just heat. Clean, dry, blistering heat. Enough to strip the cold from your bones and the dirt from your soul. Someone throws a stick into the fire and the sparks wake you up. You glance at the sky. It's nearly sunset. A gold and copper haze settles over the treetops. Shadows stretch long and dramatic across the snow. You finish your work, toss the scraps to the dogs, and finally, you make your way toward the sauna. There's a kind of reverence to it now. The others nod silently as you pass, like monks acknowledging a fellow pilgrim. You unlatch the flap, step inside, and let the wave of heat slap your face in the most delightful way. Everything melts. The cold, the aches, the stiffness in your shoulders. You sit, you sweat, you swear you can feel your spine sigh in relief. You throw water on the stones, and the hiss it makes sounds like a secret being released. You breathe, and just for a moment, you remember why you do this. Not for profit, not for legacy, but for this exact feeling, the absurd, magical miracle of warmth in the middle of a frozen world. Steam curls around your face like a lazy cat. You lean back against the makeshift wall, half log, half stitched hide, and let your thoughts dissolve into the fog. For a few minutes, you forget where you are. Not lost, just untethered. The kind of drift that only happens in places like this, where time seems to loosen its grip on your bones. Someone tosses another ladle of water onto the hot rocks. The hiss is louder now, angry even, but it fades quickly into a low purr. Across from you, Baptist wipes sweat from his brow with a scrap of wool that's long since given up pretending to be clean. You ever think we're the smartest dumb people alive? He says, You grunt, which he takes as agreement. It's -30 out there, he continues, and we're voluntarily cooking ourselves in a tent made of furs and fear. You crack a smile. Fear keeps the heat in. Fear also reminds me not to lean on the east wall, he adds, nodding at the spot where a patch of canvas is barely hanging on. I patched it with my sock last week. You raise an eyebrow. Clean? He shrugs. Define clean. Truth is, everyone in this camp has long since given up on conventional hygiene. Out here, clean means less muddy than before. It's why the sauna matters so much. It's not just a place to sweat. It's a ritual. A social contract. A cleansing that goes deeper than skin. Historians still argue whether these fur trade saunas were borrowed directly from indigenous sweat lodge traditions or developed independently by European voyageurs with shared memories of Nordic steam baths. Most likely, it's both. Survival has a way of cross-pollinating culture, especially when the outcome is a warm place to sit in your underpants. You close your eyes and listen to the room breathe. It's a symphony of damp coughs, shifting feet, the creak of wooden benches that were never meant to last a winter, and the occasional groan of satisfaction. Someone starts humming. Not a song, exactly just a sound. Low, repetitive, oddly comforting. It blends with the heat, becomes part of the air. Your body feels like a wet rag draped over a chair. Muscles melt, joints stop complaining. Even your socks, which earlier resembled frozen bricks, now cling limply to your ankles with a kind of exhausted apology. The sweat pours off you in lazy rivulets, pooling along your collarbone, slipping past your ribs. You don't even flinch. It's the best feeling you've had all week. Someone jokes about throwing stew herbs on the stones to flavor the steam. Someone else threatens to actually do it. Basil lungs, they call it. Very fashionable in Paris. The group chuckles, in that hushed, tired way that says, "We've survived another day." And that's funny enough that eventually, the heat gets to be too much. One by one, the others shuffle out, mumbling about snowbanks and cooldowns. You follow them, stepping into the icy night like a half-cooked bread roll plunged into a freezer. The cold hits like a slap. Your skin shrinks. Every hair stands on end. Your breath shoots out in great clouds, steam meeting frost and midder like rival kingdoms at war. But you're grinning. You stagger toward the snow pile, arms raised like a hero, and flop backward with all the grace of a sack of onions. Snow rushes up your back, your scalp tingles, your feet curl. It's so cold it's almost hot. You actually laugh because the shock is absurd and thrilling and ridiculously human. You roll once, twice, and then scramble back upright. Heart pounding, blood racing, steam rising from your shoulders like you're on fire inside. And in a way, you are. Back in the tent, someone claps and holds out a steaming tin mug. You earned it, they say. You take a sip. It's spruce tea sharp, slightly bitter, but laced with honey and heat. It tastes like the forest decided to apologize for biting you. You wrap yourself in a thick wool blanket and settle beside the fire. The crackle of flames feels louder now, more immediate. The dogs are sleeping in a heap, their bodies rising and falling in synchronized rhythm. Pierre is snoring in a way that suggests something tragic happened to his sinuses during childhood. Feel clean, not just washed, but rinsed from the inside out. Your mind, usually jittery with plans and numbers and the echo of cold wind, is quiet now. As if the heat evaporated your thoughts along with your sweat, you glance up at the stars, which seem closer than usual, like they're leaning in to check on you. The moonlight touches the snow with silver, soft, and lazy. Nothing is moving. Even time seems to have curled up beside the fire. Someone suggests a second round in the sauna. You raise a hand in protest. "My bones are soup," you say. They nod. "Good soup." There's a moment of shared silence. Not awkward, just understood. In this world of frostbitten toes and missing mittens, of traps and trails and endless, echoing trees, the sauna is your defiance. A ridiculous, glorious, sweaty rebellion against winter itself. And tonight, you won. The next morning, your body aches in a way that feels almost nostalgic. Not sharp pain, but that deep, soaked-in soreness that means you did something worth remembering, like hauling 6 cords of wood or winning a snowball fight against physics. You stretch under the heavy wool blankets and yawn wide enough to scare a crow if one happened to be perched nearby. But the birds are still asleep, and so is half the camp. You sit up slowly, swaddled in the kind of chill that makes your nose sting, but not enough to be unpleasant. The steam from last night lingers on your skin, now traded for the faintest smell of pine smoke and old leather. You fumble for your boots still damp, as if they too spent the night trying to thaw their feelings and begin the ritual of rejoining the waking world. Outside, the sky is painted in soft watercolor hues, faded. Peach, sleepy lavender, a smear of reluctant gold along the treetops. You step out into the crusty snow, crunching lightly with each footfall, and inhale the kind of air that could pickle a cucumber on contact. the fire pit is smoldering. Someone, probably Henry, has kept it going through the night, feeding it. Little offerings of twig and bark while the rest of the camp snored and mumbled in their dreams. A pot hangs over the coals, filled with what might generously be called breakfast. You recognize oats, maybe a raisin, possibly a pebble pretending to be a raisin. You spoon out a bit, blow on it, and take a bite. It tastes gray, but it's warm, and that counts for everything. Baptist emerges next, blanket around his shoulders like a war hero from a very cozy battle. "My lungs are made of soup," he declares. "Good soup," you reply, and the joke earns a grin. Conversations this early are minimal, mostly grunts and eyebrow choreography, but the feeling in the air is unmistakable. Today will be manageable. Not easy, never easy, but manageable. Because last night, you sweated out the worst of it. Whatever it was. Historians still argue whether the fur traders' morning routines were dictated by necessity, superstition, or sheer stubbornness. One early explorer's diary claims that voyageurs would throw a handful of snow at the sun each morning to soften its gaze. Another says they simply wanted an excuse to shout at something. Either way, there's always a ritual. You fill a tin cup with whatever tea is on offer. It tastes like bark steeped in regret and warm. Your hands around it. Nearby, someone is tending to the sled dogs, rubbing frost out of their paws and checking the harnesses. The dogs grumble, stretch, shake snow from their backs, and look at you like you might owe them a fish. The sled itself is piled high with gear, bundles of furs, sacks of flour, jugs sealed with pine tar. One jug thumps slightly, and you hope it's just expanding from the cold and not a raccoon stowaway. You help tighten the ropes, checking knots with fingers that only recently remembered how to feel again. You slap the runners a few times, not because it helps, but because everyone else does. Ritual. Again. Baptist leans in. You know what today needs? You shake your head. Sauna. Noon break. You laugh through your nose. Add lunch. And I'm in. Lunch is the sauna, he says with mock solemnity. You both know it's unlikely. Today's trail is long and the sky is clear, perfect conditions for traveling, terrible for loafing. But the idea of a midday sauna lingers in your mind like the ghost of heat past Dot as the dogs line up, pawing impatiently at the snow. You do a final check. Scarf? Check. Gloves? Mismatched, but check. Sanity? Questionable, but check. The sled lurches forward with the kind of enthusiasm that only animals bred for winter can summon. The runners squeal against the frozen ground, and your off-wind cutting against your cheeks, trees blurring past like half-remembered dreams. It's not glamorous. The trail is full of bumps and awkward angles, and at one point, you hit a snowdrift so deep it tries to claim your left boot. You recover with only mild embarrassment, pretending it was a graceful dismount and not a flailing attempt to not eat snow. By midday, the sun has found its stride, painting the snowfields in blinding white. You pause for water, chipping at the edge of a stream with your knife until you can scoop up the coldest drink you've ever had. It hurts your teeth and feels like a dare, but you finish it anyway. Lunch is salt pork and hardtack, less a meal, and more of a negotiation between your jaw and your will to live. Still, it gets the job done. You gather with the others under a cluster of pine trees, their branches drooping under snow like sleepy eyelids. No one talks much. Just the occasional grunt of appreciation when someone passes around dried blueberries, or a chunk of maple sugar hoarded from the last trading post. It's peaceful in the way only cold, hunger, and physical exhaustion can be. You sit in silence, chewing slowly, watching steam rise from your breath, and wondering if the sauna will happen again tonight. Probably not, but maybe. And that's enough. You're back on the trail, and it's just as bumpy and breath-stealing as before. But something shifted. Maybe it's the sun finally stretching across the frozen ridges, or maybe it's that faint hint of sweat and satisfaction that still lingers from last night's improvised steam bath. Whatever it is, the miles feel a little lighter underfoot today, like the ice is choosing not to argue for once. The sled dogs, full of determination and half-muttered barks, charge ahead with a kind of workday resolve. They're not joyous exactly, but they're professionals. You admire that about them. There's dignity in routine, even when that routine includes poop breaks at minus 30 degrees. Beside you, Baptist is humming. You can't place the tune, and odds are neither can he. It's just something he made up, the way fur traders often did. Songs on the trail weren't about melodies. They were about keeping rhythm, masking fatigue, and sometimes irritating the man behind you just enough to stay awake. You join in by tapping your mittened hand on the side of the sled in a loose beat. The sound is dull and soft, like a pillow thudding into snow, but it works. You feel less alone, more a part of something. Historians still argue whether voyageurs had a structured songbook or if they simply made it up as they went. Some believe they borrowed from French ballads. Others swear the chants were unique to each crew. One lonely scholar once suggested they sang to confuse wolves. That theory never caught on. The trail narrows, winding through a thicket of birch trees, their white bark peeling like ancient scrolls. It's beautiful in that stern, northern way, silent, upright, a little judgmental. You duck instinctively as a low branch swipes overhead, brushing snow onto your hood. Lunch begins to feel like a distant memory, even though it was barely 2 hours ago. You fish a piece of frozen pemmican from your coat pocket. It's chewy, dry, and strangely comforting, like biting a leather boot with emotional depth. Baptist offers you a bite of his too, which he insists tastes more spiritual than yours. You decline. He winks. Up ahead, the trail opens onto a frozen lake, wide and gleaming like a slab of captured sky. The dogs hesitate, then step cautiously onto the ice. You follow suit, testing each footfall as if the lake might remember something it didn't. Like about you, but it holds. It always does. Midway across, the wind picks up. Not aggressive, just enough to remind you that nature is in charge. You pull your scarf higher, watching your breath curl like ghostly punctuation marks in the air. There's something surreal about crossing ice this vast. The silence is absolute. No birds, no branches, no dry twigs snapping. Just your breath, your sled, and a whisper of runners skating across an ancient memory of water. Then, out of nowhere, a small wooden marker sticks out of the snow like a misplaced toothpick. It's carved with an arrow and a name, Sauna Creek. You laugh out loud. Baptist throws up his hands. A sign from the spirits. He proclaims, spinning once in place and nearly slipping on the ice. You skid to a stop at the far side of the lake, where a cluster of pines huddles together like gossiping aunties. Nestled among them is a small, tilted shack, more of a lean-to, really patched with birch bark and insulated with pine boughs. The portable sauna. Last time you saw it, it was being dragged behind a separate sled, wrapped in canvas and optimism. Now it's been set up and is already puffing a thin trail of smoke from its stone chimney. You help unload a few. Bundles firewood, a sack of spruce tips, a sealed jug marked simply for courage. The last one is probably whiskey, though. No one dares open it until the steam starts rolling. Inside the structure, it's dark and already warming up. Stones rest in a pit at the center, blackened from 100 heatings. You and Baptist begin arranging them carefully while another, voyageur maybe, starts stoking the fire beneath. Is this necessary? Someone asks from outside. No, you call back. But so is sleep, and we still do that. By the time the inside is thick with steam and the air smells like wood smoke and damp wool, the entire crew has peeled down to undershirts and long johns, sitting shoulder to shoulder like meat in a boiling sandwich. Someone passes around a tin cup of courage. You sip. It burns, then warms, then confuses you just enough to laugh. There's no talking for a while, just breathing. Long, slow inhales of hot, pine-scented air. You close your eyes and let the heat soak into your joints, like it's been personally. Invited. One Trader Jacques, the quiet one, starts humming a slow tune. It's the same you heard this morning, or close enough. Maybe it's the sauna's theme song now. Maybe every sauna has one. You hum too. Someone throws more water on the stones. The hiss is loud and wonderful. It smells like melted trees and old blessings. You lean back, your muscles turning into warm pudding. Then smile. This is the best part of winter, you decide. Not the trading. Not the marching. Not even the dogs. Just this. Heat, silence, and the camaraderie of people who've all frozen, thawed, and frozen again. Eventually, the steam begins to thin, like a curtain reluctantly being drawn. One by one, the traders begin to rouse from their sweaty stupor. There's a quiet shuffle of limbs as people reach for towels, or whatever counts as a towel in the middle of the Canadian wilderness. Sometimes a bit of worn linen, sometimes a fur scrap with delusions of grandeur. You stand slowly, bones loose, body fogged in the best way. There's a sense of ceremony to it all. No one speaks much, as though words would break the spell. Just soft grunts and the rhythmic patting of damp cloth on skin. Outside, the cold bites instantly. You gasp, and everyone laughs low and knowing. It's part of the experience. The shock. The reminder that winter is still waiting, patient and smug, just beyond the steam cloud. A few brave or foolish souls roll in the snow. One man, tall and wiry, lets out a bark of laughter as he flops face first into a drift, arms spread like a snow angel in mid-performance review. Baptiste yells, "Voila! A clean man at last!" And everyone claps sarcastically. You settle for rubbing your arms briskly and pulling on your outer layers while your breath puffs around your head like a woolen halo. Your boots feel stiffer now, reluctant after the warmth. Still, it's not unpleasant. There's something about that contrast, the deep, hot center followed by icy clarity, that makes the world feel sharper, more in focus. Historians still argue whether these steam rituals were rooted in Finnish, Russian, or indigenous traditions. Most agree it was likely a melting pot of influences. After all, the fur trade was never just a commercial venture. It was cultural cross-pollination on snowshoes. The portable saunas were as much about survival as they were about morale. You can't underestimate the power of heat and laughter after days of windburn and frostbitten toes. And maybe there's something primal in it too, sweating out the aches of the trail. Boiling off the solitude, Rene reemerges from the sauna wrapped in a blanket that smells like every tree in Ontario. He's holding a pot of spruce tea, its steam curling in the moonlight like the last line of a forgotten story. You gather around a low fire, boots braced in the snow. The tea is ladled out with a carved wooden scoop probably made from a canoe paddle, judging by its elegant jankiness. You accept a cup and cradle it with both hands, letting the heat seep back into your fingertips. It tastes like wood, slightly sour, faintly sweet. You sip and nod as though you understand something deeper than you did before. Baptiste leans over. "Tastes like a forest floor," he says. You grin. "Better than eating bark." "Only slightly," he replies. The crew begins to drift into soft conversation. Not stories, exactly, but murmured fragments. Someone mentions a cousin who traded beaver pelts for a violin. Someone else claims they once saw a fox ride an ice, flow downstream like it was a boat. You don't know what's true and what's winter delirium. It doesn't matter that someone starts whittling. Just a stick, just a knife. The shavings fall like tiny snowflakes onto the real snow. A rhythmic sound joins the quiet. Scrape, scrape, scrape dot above. The sky has cleared. The stars are fierce and honest. One of the younger voyageurs tries to name constellations, but keeps mistaking them for family members. There's Aunt Louise, he says, pointing. That's Orion. Same nose. There's laughter, soft and warm. You find a seat. On a tree stump beside the fire. The wood creaks a bit, but holds your weight. Your cloak is wrapped tight around you, and the steam from your tea mingles with your breath in small ghostly dances. And for a moment, it feels like you're not out in the middle of nowhere with frostbitten toes and a 3-day journey ahead dotting. Feels like a living room. A very cold, very smoky, very uninsulated living room, but a home all the same. One trader begins humming again. This time, a slower tune, almost a lullaby. You recognize it vaguely, a French folk melody, maybe, or something older. The notes stretch out into the trees like a bedtime story told to the snow. Someone else leans back against a sled and closes. Their eyes. Not sleeping, not yet, just letting the moment settle. You sip the last of your tea and let it warm. Your chest like a hand pressed gently to your sternum. You feel the heat linger long after the cup is empty. The fire crackles, releasing one last ember that rises into the air and then fades before it's ever seen by the stars. You don't speak. You don't need to. This, you realize, is the real reward of the sauna, not just the heat or the hygiene, but the gathering. The quiet camaraderie born not of shared words, but shared survival. You smile, stretch, and begin brushing snow from your coat. Tomorrow the trail awaits, but tonight, you've already arrived. The next morning greets you with a brittle chill and a blue sky that feels too clean to be trusted. You wake inside your fur cocoon, reluctant to move, not because you're especially comfortable, but because that first unzip of warmth is always the hardest dot around you. The camp begins its slow resurrection. Boots thump against tree trunks to shake out stiffness. Someone groans dramatically as they roll out of a wool blanket, then immediately trips over a snow-covered snowshoe. There's no shame in these mornings, only shared suffering and the occasional sarcastic applause. You sit up, squinting as light bounces off the ice-coated canvas of a nearby sled. The air is so dry it squeaks when you breathe. You stretch and groan in unison with your joints. From somewhere deeper in the woods, you hear the call of a raven, a guttural caw that sounds both amused and mildly judgmental. One of the voyageurs has already revived the fire from last night's embers. You shuffle over, arms tight across your chest, and hold out your hands as the flames wake up. A coffee-like brew is simmering in a blackened pot, and the smell somewhere between roasted bark and burnt. Optimism is oddly inviting. You wrap your fingers around a steaming tin mug and fagin. S-I-P. It's terrible. Comfortingly so. Like chewing on regret flavored with ashes. You drink the whole thing anyway. Food follows shortly. Flatbread, hardened from the cold. A strip of jerky so tough it could double as a sled lash. A shared pot of something vaguely porridge-shaped, the color of wet parchment, tasting faintly of wheat and indifference. But you eat, and so does everyone else. There's not much talking. Mornings are sacred. The real conversations start with snow under your feet. Soon, the sleds are packed, the gear strapped down, and the sauna stove carefully wrapped in oilskin and loaded near the front, lest anyone try to accidentally forget it. That stove is now part of the family. It gets better treatment than Baptist, who insists on packing himself with only a canvas roll and a smile that doesn't fully hide his hangover. You shoulder your pack, flex your fingers inside stiff gloves, and wait for the signal. Renee raises a mitten and points forward. The caravan creaks into motion, and you walk. Snow crunches underfoot in a rhythm you didn't realize your body remembered. The wind stings your cheeks, then your nose, then finds a new angle just when you think you've adapted. Welcome back. Still, there's a quiet pride in the motion. In knowing your legs are strong, your gear is sound, and your socks miraculously are. Only slightly damp. You settle into the pace of the trail. Hours pass. Trees blur. The conversation becomes occasional, doled out like rations. Someone recites old French proverbs. Someone else counters with Scottish curses. You can't tell which is which, but the tone is always affectionate dot at midday. The caravan halts near a frozen creek, its surface glassy and perfect. Renee suggests a lunch break. Someone else suggests a race across the ice. This is a terrible idea. So, of course, it happens. You watch two traders shuffle out, arms wide for balance. The first glides a few steps before landing flat on his back with the grace of a stunned beaver. The second manages a full 5 meters before his legs betray him. Laughter echoes off the trees. No one is seriously hurt, and dignity is considered optional at this point. Lunch is more jerky. A few preserved apples and a bite of that fig paste you forgot was at the bottom of your bag. It now tastes like adventure and lint. While you eat, Baptiste unrolls a scrap of parchment and sketches an idea for improving the sauna stove's chimney. His drawing is enthusiastic, if anatomically confusing. Historians still debate whether any of the traders' modifications to the sauna were functional or just fever dreams from eating too much salted cod. Likely both. The break ends with a snowball tossed gently at your shoulder. You turn, smirking, and lob one back. It explodes against Reen's hood, and suddenly, it's on. Snowballs fly. Yells ring through the woods. Someone attempts a dive behind a tree and ends up face first in a drift. A mitten goes missing. Everyone is 12 years old again. Even the raven caws in amusement. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Laughter tapers off, breaths heave in unison, and wet gloves are wrung out with shaking hands. You press a palm to your chest and feel your heart thumping wild and warm. The march resumes. Quieter now. A few snowflakes drift down as if embarrassed to interrupt. You glance ahead at the sled where the sauna stove rides, proud and soot-stained, its metal sides dented like a well-worn teapot. Somehow, it looks smug, and why not? It's the hero of the trail. You trudge on, the line of voyageurs stretching ahead like a procession of stubborn penguins. The forest thickens. The light shifts. And already, your mind is wondering, where will we camp tonight? And will there be steam? By late afternoon, the trees thin, the path dips, and you hear the whisper of water before you see it, a winding river, mostly frozen, with patches of dark currents slipping through the ice like secrets. The sky is beginning to yawn into gold. The sun already lounging low behind a row of pine. Renee halts the group and points with a lazy but decisive nod. Here is perfect. There's a gentle slope leading down to the water, plenty of flat ground and a natural windbreak formed by a low ridge covered in spruce. No signs of recent bear activity, no cracked ice, no ominous bird omens. You approve. The unloading begins in practiced silence. Packs are dropped, canvas is unrolled, and the sauna stove once again gets the honor of being carried like a sacred relic. You help set up the main campfire while someone else collects branches for kindling. Baptiste takes charge of arranging stones for the sauna's outer wall and hums a song with no clear melody but definite enthusiasm. You watch the stove come alive again, a spark, a breath of tinder, a cautious puff of smoke. Then flame. Warmth begins its slow, creeping magic. The iron groans. Wood pops. Steam dreams. As camp duties are divided, someone produces a battered tin pot and starts boiling snow for tea. The kind of tea that tastes mostly like boiled snow with just a hint of pine needle. Still, it's hot. That's half the battle. You sneak away for a moment to explore. The snow here is shallower, crisscrossed with tiny paw prints, rabbits or foxes, probably. You find a frozen cattail and crunch it between your fingers for no reason other than it's there. By the time you return, the tent is up, the stove is sizzling, and a strange sight greets you. One of the voyageurs is attempting to carve a bench out of snow using what looks like a soup ladle and boundless optimism. He gestures proudly. The bench collapses. No one says a word. You simply hand him the ladle. Back, dinner tonight is slightly more elaborate. Someone found wild onions. Someone else remembered they still had a dried hunk of smoked trout. Together, these treasures become soup-thick, salty, and weirdly satisfying. Everyone eats hunched forward, bowls cradled close, steam curling around their noses like affectionate cats. And then, just as the sun sighs below the horizon, it's sauna time. The routine is now muscle memory. You strip down with practiced indifference layers, peeling off like the bark of an overly modest tree. Steam curls out of the tiny vent like the breath of an ancient dragon. You shuffle into the dark warmth. Inside, the stove crackles softly and the air is thick with pine-scented heat. You sit on a plank that is only marginally less scorching than the surface of the sun. Every pore rebels, then surrenders. The sweat comes easy now. The sighs even easier. Renee pours a ladle of water over the hot rocks. The hiss is satisfying in that primal, caveman hair-fire way. The air thickens further. You blink slowly. Someone mutters something about their ancestors. Someone else agrees. Out of sheer humidity. It is, to use the technical term, glorious. At some point, Baptist tells the same story about the moose that stole his shirt. You're not sure if it's true, but the way he tells it, shirtless, red-faced, towel around his neck like a championship belt, it might as well be a religious parable. Historians still debate whether fur traders used the sauna as a social space, a medical necessity, or a spiritual ritual. But in this moment, it is all of the above. You feel baptized in steam, reborn in sweat, renewed and shared RIDICULOUSNESS. Eventually, someone gets up and announces, "River dip." Most decline. You do not. You stumble out, barefoot in the snow, half dizzy with heat, and sprint toward the riverbank. Your feet scream, your lungs squeak, and your heart howls, but you keep going. The hole has been cut already, a neat square of water staring up at you like a dare. You jump in. The world becomes ice and knives and clarity. Every cell in your body yells in unison, WHY. And then, just as fast, it all goes quiet. You break the surface with a gasp and a laugh. And for one shimmering second, you feel infinite. You scramble back onto snow like a seal with regrets. Someone throws a blanket around your shoulders. You glow from the inside out. Back at the fire, dry clothes feel like velvet. Someone hands you a mug of that bark and hope tea. You sip and watch sparks rise like fireflies. Later, as the stars blink awake overhead, the camp grows still. You lie in your bedroll, skin tingling, hair damp, chest light, and in that moment, with the sauna behind you and the stars above, you think, maybe this isn't such a boring history after all. Maybe it's exactly the kind that lingers. You wake slowly the next morning, snug in your blankets, nose cold but everything else wrapped in warmth. The sky above is still blushing with early light pale peach and lavender stretching wide over the frostbitten pines. Someone nearby is already up, tending to a fire that's more smoke than flame, coaxing it back to life like it's a shy animal. You rise, stretch, and note the delicious soreness in your limbs. Sauna sweats, ice dips, And snow ladle squats do more for circulation than any Enlightenment-era doctor ever imagined. Breakfast is a predictably beige affair. Hardtack, some dried apple slices, and a smudge of cold bear grease if you're feeling bold. But there's tea again, steeped from a mix of wintergreen and whatever someone swore wasn't moss. It tastes like bravery. The voyageurs are busy repacking. Ropes are coiled, snow scraped off canvas, mittens slapped against thighs. One man pauses mid-pack to solemnly brush snow from the sauna stove like it's a sacred relic, because, in a way, it is. It's a symbol of comfort in a world designed for discomfort. You help roll up the sleeping gear and notice a bundle of extra socks that no one claims. Communal sock ownership isn't a thing here, but everyone just sort of nods and moves on. Some things are best left UNASSIGNED. As the sleds are loaded, Baptiste attempts to fashion snowshoes from broken birch branches and a fishing net. It doesn't work. He insists it did once in Labrador. You decide not to ask further. By mid-morning, the caravan is back in motion. The forest crunches underfoot in that crisp way only winter can manage. Branches overhead drip lazy drops of melt, each one falling like it's on its own personal journey. You trudge along in rhythm, your pack slightly lighter now, mostly because you ate 3 people's worth of lentil stew last night. As the morning unfolds, the landscape begins to change. Trees spread out, the underbrush thins, and the sky seems to lower just a little. You pass an ancient beaver dam, half frozen and half collapsed, and one of the voyageurs mutters a joke about fur traders and their spirit animal architects. Beavers work too hard, he says. No holidays, just mud and sticks. Historians still argue whether fur trading camps followed set schedules or relied more on collective gut instinct. Judging by today's plan, walk until we're hungry, then stop. You suspect gut. Instinct wins. Midday brings a break. Not a long one, but just enough to shake out sore muscles and gnaw on a bit of salted meat. Someone finds a snow-covered stump and declares it the throne. He sits with royal posture until the snow melts beneath him and the stump proves unworthy. You all laugh the kind of laugh only people far from civilization can share. That afternoon, the mood turns introspective. The trail is straight, the sun indirect, and the miles stretch like melted taffy. Nobody sings. Even Baptiste is quiet. You think about letters left unsent, about boots with holes, about whether mint-scented curtains and sauna benches made of soup ladles are the real treasures of the wilderness. You think about how history isn't always war and kings. Sometimes it's just the story of someone hauling a stove through waist-deep snow, so his friends can sweat beside a pine-scented fire. You trudge on. The weather holds. Eventually, the group veers off the main trail toward another campsite, this one near a frozen lake. A few geese fly overhead, honking like impatient landlords. Someone waves at them. The geese do not wave back. Tonight's camp is more efficient than yesterday's. Less ceremony. More routine. Fire, tents, stove, tea. One man has a blister. It is examined, declared heroic, and bandaged with equal parts moss and sarcasm. You help build a windbreak out of snow blocks. The blocks don't stack well. A second attempt involves fewer straight lines and more enthusiastic piling. Baptiste calls it abstract shelter design. He might be a genius. Or very tired. Supper includes dried corn and a little jerky. The corn is boiled into a kind of mush that tastes like revenge. The jerky, however, is excellent. You chew thoughtfully while watching the stove exhale smoke into the lavender dusk. Steam rises again. Heat flows. This time, the sauna is quieter. Fewer jokes. More sighs. Someone hums. Someone else sleeps sitting up. You lean against the warm wood and close your eyes for a moment too long. Inside, the air smells of pine and shared stories. The Fire pops occasionally. Outside, snowflakes begin to fall light as feathers and just as aimless. After your session, you step out into the falling snow, steam pouring off your skin like a spell. You raise your arms. The snow lands on your bare shoulders, melts instantly, and you feel both wild and peaceful. You wrap yourself in wool and return to the fire, joining the others in that comfortable silence that only happens when everything else has already been said. Night creeps in, gentle and endless. You watch the last of the snowflakes vanish into flame. You wake to the sound of someone humming very off-key and the smell of something vaguely resembling breakfast. The forest is quiet, blanketed in fresh snow. It's the kind that falls so slowly you almost don't believe it's moving, like a paused painting. You sit up, brushing frost from your blanket, and blink at the unfamiliar calm. Even Baptiste isn't shouting. Today is a maintenance day, no travel. Just repairs, rest, and of course, more sauna. The portable stove stands proudly in the center of camp, its pipe already puffing lazy spirals into the overcast sky. You watch as one voyageur wraps a wet wool sock around the stovepipe to dry. It immediately begins to hiss, and someone jokes that the sock is screaming. Breakfast is a strange stew of leftover corn mush, jerky bits, and what might be pine nuts. You eat it anyway, mostly for warmth, and try not to chew too inquisitively. Repairs begin in earnest. Someone rethongs a snowshoe with deer sinew. Another patches a tear in a coat with a square of red flannel, which stands out like a warning flag but feels somehow cheerful. You're handed a needle and asked to fix a hole in a mitten. The stitching is crooked, but no one complains. Everyone knows a handmade mend holds better luck. The stove, meanwhile, is getting a makeover. Baptiste insists on carving a tiny bear into one of its legs. For strength, he says. Also, it needed a bear. No one argues. By mid-morning, you're rearranging stones around the sauna, trying to create a better heat trap. One of the voyageurs explains the science of it with an air of mysticism. The stones remember the fire, he says, pointing to a soot-covered boulder. That one dreams in steam. Historians still argue whether fur traders understood thermodynamics, or just got very lucky with rocks. Either way, the sauna works. The heat blooms evenly. The sweat comes easily. You take your shift chopping firewood, the rhythm meditative. Chop, crack, stack. A few brave birds flutter nearby, pecking at the edge of the clearing. You toss them a crumb of hardtack. They eye it suspiciously, as if waiting for it to move. A snowfall begins light but steady, the kind that changes the sound of everything, turning cracks into muffled sighs. The camp hushes, everyone moving slower, softer, as if not to wake the sky. Someone pulls out a fiddle. It's out of tune, but no one minds. The tune is slow, minor, and wandering, like a thought half remembered. A few men sway in time. One falls, asleep on a pile of sled ropes. You retreat into the sauna again, the stove now glowing like an embered heart. The steam is thicker than yesterday. Somebody added dried spruce needles to the water. It smells like winter's version of incense. You sit with your knees tucked to your chest, listening to the fire crackle and the snow melt from your hair. There's something about this warmth, this quiet, that makes time feel optional. You close your eyes and breathe slowly, deeply. Later, wrapped in wool and drowsy from heat, you join the others by the fire. Someone's boiling tea again. This time it's birch bark and maybe a slice of dried pear. The taste is odd, but comforting-like. Chewing on a tree while being hugged by nostalgia. The sun, such as it is in these parts, begins to dip behind the trees. Shadows stretch across the snow like long-limbed dancers. The fire pops. A spark jumps and lands on your boot. You brush it away, feeling oddly honored by its attention. Dinner is stew again. this time thickened with flour scraped from the bottom of a sack. It's hearty, bland, and perfect. You eat slowly, savoring the way each bite seems to ground you more deeply into this moment, this place. Afterward, someone tells a story about a moose that once wandered into camp and tried to join the sauna. Everyone swears it's true. You nod along, mostly because you want it to be dot as the stars come out. Baptist stands and stretches. Tonight, he announces, I sleep like a log, but a warm log, one that just got out of a sauna. You crawl into your blanket smiling. Snow falls more heavily now, blanketing the camp in a hush so complete it feels like the world is holding its breath. The stove glows faintly through the tent wall. The logs inside sigh as they settle. You turn over once, twice, then still. The forest keeps watch. The steam has done its work, and your dreams, when they come, arrive gently, wrapped in smoke and snow and the smell of pine. The next morning arrives not with sunlight, but with a slow silvering of the sky. You crack open one eye to find the world dusted in fresh snow, the kind that softens all edges and makes even your crusty boots look like artifacts of great nobility. Your breath rises in small clouds. You decide not to move yet, but then you hear it, a kettle singing. More precisely, it's wheezing. Someone overfilled the camp stove again, and now a battered tin kettle is letting out a sound that suggests both enthusiasm and structural fatigue. You rise. Outside, the sauna is already warming, its chimney releasing steady curls of white. A light breeze carries the scent of cedar smoke and boiled socks. Someone waves you over with a cup black spruce tea, strong enough to slap you awake. You take a sip and almost cough. Almost thought breakfast is something different today. Baptist has produced a small pouch of what he claims are blueberries. They are, in fact, small frozen rocks that taste faintly of fruit and mostly of cold. Still, they brighten the pot of porridge and give the illusion of vitamins. The camp is busy. Again. Today, the traders are expecting guests, another small company heading south for winter. This is a rare treat. Outside conversation, potential for gossip, and maybe even someone who has news of the world beyond this pine-wrapped nowhere. You're put on greeting duty, which mostly involves standing near the trail with an expression of vague welcome and a handful of semi-thawed jerky. You wait and wait. Then, movement among the trees. A team of dogs pulling a sleigh comes into view, followed by several bundled figures who look like animate stacks of laundry. The newcomers wave. You wave. The dogs do not wave. The camps merge easily. Packs are dropped. Saunas are admired. Baptist brags about the steam efficiency of his stove, while a rival voyageur insists his version boils rocks faster. You suspect a rock boiling competition is imminent. And indeed, by late afternoon, it is on. 2 stoves. 2 pots. Identical rocks. One stopwatch of questionable accuracy. A crowd gathers. Bets are made in firewood and dried apples. You hold the stopwatch. The countdown begins. Steam pours. Flames dance. One stove sputters, the other roars. The crowd cheers. A dog barks at the snow. And in the end, it's declared a tie. Everyone pretends to be outraged, but really they're just happy for an excuse to cheer. Later, both groups cram into the sauna together. It's steamy, crowded, and filled with laughter. Someone starts singing a voyageur song, half French, half improvised, and everyone joins in badly. The harmony is non-existent, but the spirit is impeccable. You find yourself sitting next to a newcomer who tells you he once tried to build a portable oven for baking pies on the trail. It exploded. He still has the scar. You suggest he try building a portable bakery next time. He laughs, only if you run it. Outside, someone has hung a line with socks and mittens steaming gently in the cold air like strange winter fruits. A squirrel eyes them hungrily, then wisely scampers away. Dinner that night is shared a stew combining both camp supplies. It's a strange but delightful mix of beans, dried fish, turnip, and something someone insists is wild flavor. You believe them. Around the fire, stories flow like sap in spring. One man recounts the time his sled ran over his own foot for 20 miles. Another swears he once courted a girl in Montreal by gifting her a pickled onion every day for a month. Did it work? Someone asks. She married the blacksmith, he replies. Everyone nods solemnly. Tough break. The stars begin to peek out again. One of the new voyageurs pulls out a flute and plays a slow, wandering tune that makes even the dogs sigh. You close your eyes, feeling the heat of the fire on your cheeks and the weight of steam still clinging to your limbs. Historians still argue whether fur trade gatherings like these served any real business purpose, or if they were just elaborate excuses for steam, stew, and storytelling. Judging by the contentment hanging in the air, you'd vote for the latter. Eventually, someone declares bedtime. The camps divide again, but now there's laughter, handshakes, a few joking insults about stolen sausages. You return to your blanket. Roll, body loose, breath warm, spirit oddly full. You fall asleep to the sound of another kettle sighing on the stove and the low murmur of a lullaby in a language you don't recognize but understand anyway. The following morning, your bones protest. Not because of any hardship, just the sheer luxury of having slept too well on a surface too firm. You stretch, slowly, limbs creaking like a well-used canoe. Outside, it's snowing again. Not heavily. Just a quiet sprinkle, as though the sky is seasoning the world with frozen salt. Baptist is already up. He's added extra spruce needles to the sauna fire, claiming they sharpen the steam. You suspect this is complete nonsense, but it smells delightful, so you say nothing. A few of the newer voyageurs are dismantling their sauna, carefully packing stones into padded crates like sacred relics. You lend a hand. One man explains how his stones were once part of a ruined church in Torrevieres. So the steam is holy, he insists, deadpan. You nod with mock reverence. Then comes the chore nobody likes. For inspection. Dozens of pelts are unrolled, examined, fluffed, and cataloged. You help hold them up to the light, squinting at each one as if it might reveal a secret. Beavers, martens, the occasional rare silver fox. One fur smells oddly of mint. No one knows why. Historians still argue whether fur sorting followed any standardized method or if each company made it up as they went along. Baptist, ever helpful, claims he sorts by cuddliness and moral character. As the sun climbs still pale, still half-hearted, the camp begins to prepare for departure. The mood is neither rushed nor lazy. It's the pace of people who know that getting ready is half the journey. You gather your few items and help strap bundles onto sleds. The process is absurdly complicated. Ropes tangle. A kettle is dropped twice. A dog steals someone's mittens and refuses to give them back unless bribed with jerky. The final goodbyes are predictably long. There are salutes, handshakes, bear hugs, and the ceremonial swapping of small gifts. You're handed a carved wooden spoon with a hole in the middle. It's for stirring regrets, the man says, laughing. You promise to treasure it. As the other camp departs, a silence settles. Not lonely, just uncluttered. You sit by the fire, sipping weak tea and watching the tracks disappear into the pines. Baptist joins you. He sighs contentedly. Nice folks, he says. Terrible singing. You smile. He's not wrong. Later that afternoon, you return to sauna maintenance. The rocks are swapped. The chimney is cleaned. Someone repairs a crack in the stove using birch sap and a curse. It seems to hold. Then unexpectedly, a snowfall picks up. Thick flakes tumble from the sky, blurring the trees and silencing the forest. The whole world goes soft. You and Baptiste look at each other, then race to light the sauna again, knowing that a steam bath during snowfall is a rare and glorious thing. Inside, steam billows and melts the cold from your bones. You sit in near silence, listening to the snow thudding gently against the roof. Someone has brought pine needles and placed them on the rocks. The scent is sharp, clean, like memory boiled into mist. Outside, a deer passes by, oblivious or unimpressed. You catch a glimpse of it through a crack in the door, legs moving through snow like a whisper. Someone hands you a small slab of maple sugar, half melted from pocket warmth. You let it dissolve on your tongue. It tastes like forests and winters. And things not quite forgotten. Later, a few of you sit outside the sauna in your cloaks, steaming like overcooked dumplings, watching the snow slow dance through the dusk. No one talks. There's nothing left to say that isn't already floating in the air between you. That night, you write in your journal. Just a few lines. Built steam in the snow. Saw a deer. Maple sugar. Good day. The ink smudges where your hand rests too long. You leave it that way. By morning, the snow has stopped, leaving behind a soft, glittering quilt that stretches to the tree line. Your boots sink in only slightly as you step outside, breath forming lazy clouds in the crisp air. Baptiste greets you with a solemn nod, and a cup of something hot and unidentifiable. You sip it anyway. It tastes like cinnamon, pine, and questionable decisions. It's a rest day, apparently. Not officially declared. Of course, fur traders don't really do days off, but the fire is crackling lazily, and no one's shouting about traps or inventory. Someone has carved a checkerboard into a stump, and you watch two men play using buttons and pebbles. One of them wins suspiciously often. The other accuses him of sorcery. A pinnacone is thrown. They both laugh. The sauna is given a break today. 2. Instead, someone strings up a hammock between two sleds and promptly falls out of it. Twice. You applaud anyway. Effort deserves recognition. Later. You follow Baptiste on a walk. He calls it a supply check, but it's really just an excuse to visit the frozen river nearby. It gleams under a pale sun, quiet and solid. He pokes it with a stick, nods approvingly, and declares it sturdy enough for moose dancing. You question him. He assures you this is a real thing. Only in February, he adds. Historians still argue whether voyageurs truly believed in these forest myths or simply used them to break the tedium. The line between folklore and frostbite-induced imagination is slippery. As you circle back to camp, you pass a cluster of birds huddled together on a branch. They look annoyed. Probably just cold. Baptiste whistles at them. They ignore him. He pretends not to mind. The afternoon stretches on in peaceful idleness. A few people trade stories about river crossings and bad portages, each tale growing slightly more exaggerated with each retelling. Someone claims a muskrat once stole their compass. You're not sure whether to laugh or sympathize. By dusk, the sky shifts into a bruise-colored canvas, and someone lights a lantern using a coal pinched delicately in tongs. It's oddly elegant, considering this is the same man who earlier tried to dry his socks over a fire and singed one into a fringe. Dinner is simple. Dried fish rehydrated into something edible, flatbread warmed on a stone, and for dessert, frozen. Cranberries dipped in syrup. The combination cracks between your teeth like ice and sugar. Afterward, a quiet descends, not out of boredom, but contentment. A few traders hum low tunes by the fire. Someone fiddles with a flute that seems mostly decorative. You sit with your knees pulled up, watching sparks drift into the air like tiny lanterns. Then Baptiste clears his throat. Story time, he declares, but only lies. And so it begins. a circle of half-truths and full laughter. A tale of a ghost moose with glowing antlers, a fish that grants wishes if kissed on the lips, but only once a decade, a haunted pair of boots that walk to Montreal on their own. You don't know how many of these tales are old, how many invented tonight, but all of them feel like part of the forest now. The stars emerge overhead, shy and flickering. Someone points out a constellation and names it the Burnt Pancake. No one argues. Later, you wander off to the edge of camp, the snow muffling your steps. It's quiet, deeply so. The kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat sound like a drum. You look up at the sky, tracing invisible lines between stars, and breathe deeply. You can smell the lingering scent of wood smoke on your cloak. A good smell. A safe smell. You return to your shelter, really just a pile of blankets over pine boughs, and settle in. The warmth from the day lingers. Somewhere, a loon calls across the ice. You've never seen a loon, but its voice seems to know you anyway. You close your eyes and let the world soften. You wake slowly, the dawnlight filtered through snow-laced branches and the haze of sleep. The chill bites gently at your nose, but the rest of you is wrapped in layers that smell of fire, sap, and the faintest hint of smoked trout. The world. Outside your covers is silent, save for the occasional rustle of canvas or the distant creak of a snow-laden branch giving up its burden. Baptist is already up, of course. You hear him stomping around somewhere outside, muttering good-natured curses at a snowshoe that's gone missing again. You imagine it leaning smugly against a tree, just out of sight, plotting its next escape. You stretch, sit up, and tug your boots on with the resigned groan of someone who has accepted that their socks will never be dry again. The fire pit outside has been coaxed back to life, and someone is warming a pot of grain porridge over the embers. It smells faintly of maple, in the way that only things that are trying to smell like maple can. As you step out, a light flurry begins, the flakes dancing lazily through the morning stillness. One lands on your sleeve, a tiny six-pointed marble, so precise it could have been etched by hand. You marvel at it just long enough for it to melt. The plan for the day is simple. Pack up, move downriver, and maybe, if the weather holds, build another makeshift sauna before dusk. You feel both oddly excited and mildly horrified by the idea. Your last sauna visit involved a near slip on frozen birchwood and a small burn on your elbow from misjudging steam angles. Still, you're weirdly looking forward to it. There's a rhythm now to life among these traders, one born from equal parts necessity and stubborn humor. Everything takes time. Boots must be laced just so. Sleds packed with awkward efficiency, tools checked twice and then promptly lost anyway. But there's a comfort in the repetition, in the shared language of shrugs, grunts, and exaggerated facial expressions that pass for full conversations when it's cold enough. You help load a bundle of trade goods, bundles of beaver pelts, jars of rendered bear fat, bundles of dry herbs, a handful of small carved trinkets likely intended as gifts or good luck charms. One has a face on it that looks suspiciously like Baptiste. You don't ask. As the caravan moves, snow crunches rhythmically underfoot. The trees shift around you, the trail narrowing and then widening again like the breath of the forest. Occasionally, you pass a fox trail, tiny prints weaving confidently through the powder. Once, you glimpse the fox itself, red, sleek, utterly uninterested in your existence. It glances at you once, then vanishes like mist. The sun does its best to warm things, but by noon, it's given up the fight. Someone breaks open a sack of dried apples, and you chew on one thoughtfully, grateful for the sweetness. Baptiste tells a story about a trader who once mistook a skunk for a cat and lost an entire sled to the incident. No one is sure if he's exaggerating, but everyone laughs anyway. Around mid-afternoon, the group halts near a partially frozen stream. It's a natural stopping point sheltered by pine, with enough space to build a fire and perhaps, just perhaps, assemble another version of the traveling steam hut. You've stopped asking if this is normal. At this point, any scenario involving frostbite and hot rocks seems perfectly reasonable. This time, the sauna is built with slightly more care. The tarp is reinforced with pine boughs and the new stone ring has been dug to hold the coals. Someone's even carved a small vent hole in the top for steam. You help carry in the hot rocks carefully, with mittens, and Baptist nods in approval. Looks almost professional, he grins. Almost? You ask Dot, he just shrugs and starts ladling snowmelt onto the stones. Steam hisses into the air, curling like spirits escaping from the earth. You sit again in the warmth, limbs loose, muscles sighing. The others are quiet too, lulled by the gentle heat and the faint crackle of firewood just outside. One man hums softly a lullaby or maybe a prayer. It fits either way. Historians still argue whether these steam rituals were more about cleanliness or community. Some say it was spiritual. Others swear it was purely medicinal. Likely, it was all of those things and something else entirely. A way to feel human in a world that often felt far too cold and vast. As twilight creeps in once more, the fire is allowed to dwindle. Someone tosses a handful of spruce needles onto the coals, releasing a sharp, green perfume into the air. You breathe it in and feel the forest settle on your skin like a second cloak. Dinner is eaten in quiet satisfaction, simple fare again, but shared, and somehow that makes it taste better. There's a joke about catching snowflakes on tongues that goes awry when someone sneezes dramatically into their stew. No one minds. That night, wrapped again in warmth and wilderness, you lie on your back and watch the stars blink into view. There's no moon tonight, but the sky is full of sharp, crystalline light, each star burning with the icy clarity of winter. You close your eyes, the scent of pine still in your nose, and let yourself drift. The night deepens slowly, like ink seeping across parchment. The wind outside your tent rustles faintly through the trees, more whisper than threat, and the snow settles into its softest hush yet. You wake only briefly, unsure what stirred you, but it doesn't matter. The silence is complete in a way that feels curated, like nature itself is holding its breath so you can return to sleep undisturbed. By morning, the world has changed again. The snowfall from the night before has covered the campsite in a fresh layer of powdered white, untouched except for the neat paths leading to and from the fire pit. The sun rises slowly, shyly, through the frost-laced branches, casting gold light over everything it touches. You peek from beneath your layers, blink twice, and feel a smile ease across your face. You're sore in places you didn't know could ache. Your shoulders, your calves, even a suspicious muscle along your ribcage that surely wasn't there before. You stretch, wincing, and then smell the telltale hint of breakfast. Something hot and vaguely flour-based is being fried in bare grease, and someone has found the last of the fig preserves. Baptist waves you over with a piece of bannock already in hand. You chew it with the contentment of a person who has no expectations beyond warmth and possibly seconds. Today is a day of return. Not to civilization, heavens no. Not yet, but to the halfway post where a different team of traders will take over. The cargo and the stories, and your group will resupply. There's a half-frozen river to cross, which is met with the usual grumbling. A few sled runners have warped from last night's cold, and Baptist has declared war on one of them. You're not entirely sure he's joking. The team moves a little slower today. Maybe it's the buildup of small aches. Maybe it's the growing awareness that the journey is almost done. There's always that funny reluctance at the end of an adventure. You crave rest, but you're not quite ready to stop moving. As you travel, you pass another group heading the opposite way. They're bundled so tightly they look like walking bundles of wool and frost. Greetings are exchanged in exaggerated hand gestures and wordless noises. No one wants to remove gloves for an actual handshake. One man offers a chunk of hardened maple candy in exchange for a flint striker. No one knows if the trade is fair, but both parties walk away satisfied. Along the trail, you spot signs of animal life: hair prints, squirrel chatter, and even a moose in the distance, chewing slowly like the forest's sleepy landlord. The sight makes everyone pause. Not for danger, just reverence. You're all small things here. By the time the sun begins its descent again, the transfer post comes into view, a cluster of wooden structures, part storage, part shelter, part room or mill. You unload what needs unloading, stretch your back, and sit on an overturned crate while the others sort out what goes where. Someone hands you a hot drink. You're not entirely sure what's in it, but it tastes of cloves, pine, and mild suspicion. You sip anyway. As the fire is rekindled for the evening, stories are shared again. One man tells of how he once lost a sled to a startled goose. Another swears he saw a ghost in the steam of a late-night sauna. No one questions it. The cold does. Funny things to perception. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were formalized exchanges or informal rituals of camaraderie. What's clear is that something about the rhythm of snow, sweat, and stories has a way of making even the wildest tailies feel honest. That night, you share a shelter with two other traders and a dog that snores louder than a thunderclap. You wrap yourself tighter in your blankets and try not to laugh as the dog lets out a particularly dramatic wheeze. Your thoughts drift back to the saunas, to the cedar steam, the laughter, the way your muscles melted into themselves. It's odd how quickly something so strange can feel so necessary. You make a mental note to build another someday, perhaps even when you're home. Wherever that ends up being, you fall asleep faster than you expect, lulled by fire crackle, distant footsteps, and the sound of someone sharpening a blade in soft, even strokes. The night embraces the camp like a blanket that's seen years of use frayed at the corners, but warm in all the right ways. The fire outside burns low now, flickering softly beneath the rising moon, its glow dancing across the snow and casting gentle shadows that sway like lullabies. Your breath moves in slow, visible clouds fading almost as soon as they appear. The air is crisp but not cruel, and even the cold has softened its edge in respect for the stillness that has settled over this strange, frozen chapter of your journey. The dog at your feet lets out a final sleepy sigh, and the last voice from Abe outside fades into silence, swallowed by the hush of snow and stars. Overhead, the sky glitters with impossible clarity, stars so bright they seem to hum. Somewhere far beyond the trees, a distant owl calls once, as if to remind you that the world continues even as you sleep. You feel your body sink deeper into rest, each muscle letting go, each thought stretching out and fading gently. The scents of pine and wood smoke linger in the air around you, grounding you in this quiet, forgotten pocket of time. There's nothing left to do, nowhere else to be, only this moment, only this calm. And as you drift further toward dreams, the last of the fire crackles once more like a whisper, then stillness.